Iran has shot down 2 U.S. warplanes in one day. One American service member remained trapped behind enemy lines, and this after 6 weeks of fighting. These events may turn the tide and change the course of war. Iran says it shot down an F-15E over its territory. It carried at least 2 crew members. The first American aviators were shot down over enemy territory since 2003. U.S. forces reportedly rescued 1 crew member within hours, but another remains missing more than 24 hours later. U.S. media reports citing a congressional aide said that Pentagon has informed a House panel that the status of the missing service member is not known. And this comes as Iran has declared a reward for capturing the crew member alive. Listen to this.
Please pay attention. Dear viewers, please pay attention. Residents of Kogiluya and Boya Ahmad province, dear and courageous people, if you capture and hand over a pilot or pilots of the enemy alive to the law enforcement and military forces, you will receive a valuable reward and prize.
The crash kicked off a rescue and search operation. Iranian media reported that the U.S. sent out a C-130 Hercules plane and Black Hawk helicopters to look for the crew. But these aircraft also came under heavy Iranian fire. Now, U.S. officials told Reuters that 2 Black Hawk helicopters involved in the search effort were hit but made it out of Iranian airspace. An A-10 providing close air support was also hit. Reports said it crashed in Kuwait after the pilot ejected. Iranian state media also released a video claiming that it showed Iranian air defense downing the American A-10 aircraft. However, the veracity of the video could not be confirmed. Iranian state broadcaster Arab shared a claim saying it was a black day for U.S. aviation. It listed the alleged losses and hits, including the F-15E jet, the 2 Black Hawk helicopters, and it said that 2 A-10 aircraft were also hit, with one crashing in the Persian Gulf and the other making an emergency landing. It claimed 2 emergencies for American aircraft, one for an F-16 over Iraq and another for a KC-135 over Israel. Now, the F-15 Eagle is first U.S. plane to go down in Iranian territory in 5 weeks of the war. It is a twin-engine, all-weather tactical fighter with a range of about 5,000 kilometers. It is known for its undefeated air-to-air combat record. Each unit cost nearly 90 to 94 million US dollars. Now, the U.S. military has announced the loss of several aircraft during Iran operations, including 1 tanker that crashed in Iraq and 3 F-15 jets that were shot down by Kuwaiti friendly fire. President Trump cancelled all press conferences after convening national security team. Hours later, President Donald Trump told NBC that the F-15 loss would not affect negotiations with Iran, saying, "No, not at all. No, it's war." And for more on this, we're being joined by Professor Tilman Ruff, co-president of International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War. Thank you so much, Professor Ruff, for joining us on the broadcast. Now, there's a lot to unpack here. In the last few weeks, the U.S. has been projecting air dominance over Iran. But if jets are being hit and even rescue missions are coming under fire, do you think it's going to get harder from here on for Trump to keep downplaying the threat from Iran?
Yes, I think the longer this conflict rages, the more it will play into Iran's rather than United States hands. I mean, militarily, this is a relatively small, this is a very one-sided conflict. There have been claimed over 15,000 targets that the United States and Israel have hit with relative impunity in Iran over the month of this war. But this is significant both in terms of its substance and in terms of its timing, because clearly, despite the claims by United States leaders that Iran's forces have been very substantially degraded, its air force and air defenses essentially obliterated, clearly there is still capacity there, not just to launch offensive operations against neighboring countries and Israel, but also to directly attack intervening US aircraft. This might become particularly significant as it was reported a day or two ago that the US is now flying B-52 Stratofortresses, so they're huge, largest long-range bombers over Iran. These are not maneuverable like the fighter aircraft that were shot down. These are very large aircraft that would be militarily hugely significant if they came under attack. So it does show that Iran still has significant entrenched capacity despite this relentless onslaught of bombing operations.
Right, Professor Ruff, and Trump has claimed that the situation with the downed jet is not going to affect negotiations with Iran. But if the downed US airman is captured, could it become a turning point in the conflict and also, of course, impact the negotiations with Iran going forward?
Look, it's hard to know. It's very difficult to know how the US leadership will react to any development. I mean, their claims about the purpose for this war, about when it might finish, about what the aims are, have changed from day to day, and there appears to be very little plan in terms of what the objectives are or what would end the war. We're hearing essentially a different story every day. Of course, once American forces face serious challenge, then this will, I think, ignite domestic opposition in a way that will be much stronger. And I think Trump is already under pressure in that regard because of the major global economic disruption that these attacks are causing and the rising petrol prices, particularly in the United States, the flow-through effects that has on every economy in a context where the Republicans, well, the Congress is facing midterm elections rather soon. So he will want to downplay and end any domestic disadvantages from this conflict. So I think the US will come under more pressure now, but without wanting to be brutal about it, in the context of such a large war with thousands of people killed, with well over 3 million people displaced in Iran, with 1.5 million people displaced in Lebanon. There have been casualties and deaths, particularly on the civilian side, across the region. So the loss of one life is, of course, a tragedy whenever it occurs, but in the military scale of things, it's not a significant event, I would say. And clearly, Iran has been fighting back on multiple fronts.
And having said that, Professor Ruff, do you think that what we're seeing with these low-cost systems downing advanced US aircraft, do you think it could change how we understand asymmetric warfare in this conflict?
Yes, and Iran, in a sense, have been the masters at that, and that's one reason why Russia has turned very extensively to Iranian supply of drones in their war on Ukraine. So yes, Iran doesn't have nuclear weapons, that's clear. It certainly has quite well-developed short and medium-range ballistic missile capacity, air defenses. Unfortunately, it's using cluster munitions as well. But yes, this is really a model for how asymmetric warfare, I think, is developing with increasing use of drones and intelligence and surveillance, the information side of a conflict being increasingly crucial rather than troops, confronting each other across a battle line.
Of course, and now with Iran's continued resistance, do you think it signals perhaps a longer and even more complicated conflict for the US than it had initially anticipated playing out?
Well, I think it would have been extremely naive to believe that any such conflict against a very well-armed population, a country of over 100 million people, would ever be short or clean. I mean, that this is really a myth that's promulgated for domestic political purposes. It's not a realistic scenario. There are no conflicts of this nature that have ended, quickly or cleanly. So I think the longer this plays, the greater the risks, certainly, of escalation, of increasing desperation, frustration, anger on the US and Israeli side, where the political imperatives to bring this to an end will only increase. Of course, there's the potential for other heavily armed, including nuclear armed states, to get involved, Russia or China. So the longer this goes, certainly the risks escalate and are extremely profound. And I would be very worried about brinkmanship and pressure and leaders making decisions under pressure that may only increase those already very considerable risks of escalation, including use of nuclear weapons. And one hopes that that is not on the table on the Israeli or US side, but certainly both of them have nuclear weapons.
Absolutely, and we understand, Professor Rav, this is still an evolving situation, and there are still many pieces which are yet to fall in place to give us a clear sense as to where this conflict is headed next. But for now, thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast and sharing your perspective with us.
Many thanks.